Loud. Yes. Okay. So thank you so much, everybody, for being there in the Gompa. I feel very happy that this. Ooh, now the image gone. So I was really happy that now I can see you guys. Now much better. Yes, I like these. I like these very much. Now I can see everybody. Yes. Yes, yes, yes. Yes, now I like it. So it's all my fault because I've been very naughty monk. So I kind of like I took the little speaker, that we have at the center because the center in Brazil really needed one, and then I forgot to ask, and then we couldn't buy on Amazon Prime or the days like this and da da da. So so it didn't come in on time. But apparently tomorrow will come, and then on Thursday you guys can try to hear me. So I'm gonna speak very loud so you can try to hear me. Okay, like that. Is that okay? Can you guys hear me well, Bob? Yes? Okay, very good. So wonderful that we're gonna continue these. As I say, it is the gradual path to enlightenment, but we're starting. We are kind of like approaching. I like it more to say that is the approaching the Buddhist path. We are just slowly figuring out what it means, what the Buddhist means, what is that, why the Buddha said that, why the Buddha said, why these things like that, why this is like that after that, why this comes first and this comes later. To understand a little bit of the Buddhist philosophy and the Buddhist pedagogical aspects and the methodology of it, we need to understand a bit more, right? About the approach that the Buddha used. So that's why we're doing this course, so kind of like we can gradually familiarize ourselves slowly, so we can eventually understand the entire path, from here, from the where we are at until we achieve enlightenment. What are the necessary steps? Because it needs to make it. And this path is not an external path, It's not that we go and we take the sun pass, and then once you have some pass, then you can go, to enlightenment. It would be so good. There is a one person over there, the center now, Steve. He works for SunPass, he told us last week. So, we could just go to Steve's office and say, Steve, bring us to SunPass to enlightenment, but it doesn't work. So, it means that we need to do it the inner job. That is where we actually develop. It's an inner path. But inner path also is something that if we think about it, even we might be kind of like trying or using or knowing about an inner path or a spiritual path, we might not be using it in a way that it has brought so many changes and specific changes that would bring us to enlightenment, but especially to happiness, and not suffering. So that is a very big difference from the spiritual path of the Buddhist experience, of the Buddhist path, because it brings us from an internal experience that will bring us to have happiness and not suffer. Right? And for that, we need to start then slowly familiarizing ourselves with these different components so we can actually start to understand what is suffering and what are the causes of the suffering and how to achieve happiness and what are the causes for happiness. If you think about it, that is the idea of the Buddhist path. So that is why we are doing these classes. Okay, so in order to start and to make sure that this becomes a Buddhist, and a kind of like a Dharma path, a Dharma activity, we need to set up a motivation. Not only any motivation, but a motivation that will bring us towards enlightenment. Otherwise, it's not Dharma, as we just said, Otherwise, if we don't actually aspire or we don't create the intention to develop these inner methods and these inner tools within ourselves in order to achieve happiness and to achieve non-suffering, then if we don't create that intention, then there's no such thing as an activity that is Dharma. Okay? Even though we might kind of like think that we come to the center or we come and we listen to blah 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 from Kalden and we meditate and we read Buddhist books and all of that, we think that this is Dharma. No Dharma there. because there's no intention. The intention is not to achieve enlightenment. The intention is just to have a calm mind so I can order on Amazon Prime more relaxed. That's the idea. Then no dharma in there, you know? So as long as we actually develop that intention, that wish, you know, and right now, that intention and that wish for eliminating our suffering and wanting to achieve happiness might feel a little bit wobbly or might not feel strong enough because we still don't understand completely. So the more we understand our current situation and the sufferings we have and the causes of suffering, the more that intention starts to become more authentic. The more we start to become more stronger in that way that we're going to kind of like develop that intention. You know, because as I say, Buddhism doesn't work with blind faith. Buddhism works with our own mind, right? With the logical and the rational part of our own mind, bringing ourselves to not convince ourselves, but to experience the benefits of changing the way we think, changing the way we act, changing the way we speak, into then experience happiness, inner happiness, even external happiness, no? But especially also the absence of suffering. So it needs to come from our own experience. And for that, the only way is to then create an inner motivation. So this motivation can actually bring us the result that we want, right? Because as we were saying a few times already, everything of our body, of our mind, of our speech, it comes for us from a mental state. It is, how do you say, preconditioned by, you know, I will use the funny word, preconditioned, you know, by the, 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 the mental activity. And even the thought, it is in some ways coming something before it is a motivation, an intention. So motivation and intention is very important. Okay? So that's why we need to really, really try to create a motivation and an intention that will bring us to that ending state or there of that goal of enlightenment. And the goal of enlightenment has two aspects, as we already said or seen a few times, is the completely elimination of my suffering and the completely perfection of my qualities so I can be of benefit, so I can help sentient beings, all sentient beings, all of them, okay? Even the mosquitoes, ants, all of them, okay? So all of them can also be free from suffering and achieve happiness. Okay? So that is the goal. As long as it's clear in our mind, so then we try to create that intention. We try to really motivate ourselves. So that's why we're going to do the prayers that we normally do. I'll share, Jack. So like this, you can just relax and enjoy. And I'm very happy to see you there, my friend, because I missed you very much. So let me find it doesn't exist. I cannot find. Now I can. So what happens is that if we start to understand that the prayers, the aspirational prayers that we're gonna do, these aspirational prayers, they gonna go and counteract, directly counteract, okay? That's what they're gonna do. Let me close here, and then when I start, we do. They're gonna directly counteract the suffering and the way we are creating that suffering, okay? And they're gonna directly make us develop, let's say like that, you know, the qualities that we need in order to achieve enlightenment. So the prayers, they are in some ways, they are a motivation, they help as an intention, but they also help as a tool because already they counteract the mind. But it makes sense what I'm saying? Yes? Does it make sense? It is not only like, like an aspiration, as in the way of saying, oh, yes, I wish, that everybody's okay. No, it's already by us creating that intention. And really, when we speak the words, and if we speak the words and we put the intention of what those words are saying into action, therefore they become themselves an antidote, a direct antidote for like bringing us to enlightenment. Yes? So that is very important. That is why, prayers, they have different levels, and the more we understand them, the more we actually engage with them, and the more we rejoice. Because sometimes what happens, and I've heard so many people saying this to me, wow, 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 so many people, even know the people, and even myself, because I'm a very bad monk. So what happens is that many times we don't get joy from the prayer sometimes, right? Sometimes people say, but I don't actually, like it doesn't get me, just like repeating some words. Yes, if we just understand repeating the words and we don't actually put them, as we don't understand their meaning, we don't understand their like what it comes behind, and we don't understand the result that they were actually aiming for us to arrive, then we don't actually see so much the benefit of it. So then, yes, and it's true that we are so used to kind of like instant happiness, instant pleasure, that we think that, just repeating the words will immediately give us the pleasure. If we put the mind into it, it can. But as long as we are just repeating words, as we are repeating, the the recipe ingredients, the ingredients of a recipe, then yeah, then it just doesn't make anything, right? We need to read the ingredients. We need to take the recipe. We need to go to what is the name of the Walmart, or to Sprouts, or to that one I like very much, Publix, Audi, Publix, and then you go there, then you buy everything, and even those buying not makes any difference still, until you actually start cooking, right? And putting the recipe in practice. So that is what we need to understand when we're doing these prayers. Okay? Let's not forget that. So the first one that we're going to do is that what we call the four immeasurable thoughts. And they are a direct direct antidote for our selfish, very self-centered attitude of me. So that's why we need to kind of like open and think about it, and especially what we're going to talk about today, we're going to talk about today the Four Noble Truths in a bit more details, understanding what suffering really means. Yeah, because otherwise we don't understand what we are asking, or what we kind of like, what we are asking, or what we are aspiring, for beings to be free from. Yeah, if we don't understand, we just say, oh yeah, may they be free from suffering, but I don't know what suffering is, but I don't know, what type of suffering. Maybe, yeah, maybe they didn't get the super size, food that they wanted, or maybe the food was not what they wanted, the burrito, or no, pad thai, not the pad thai, these now pad thai. I need to start remembering. Now it's pad thai not good, or too spicy curry, then they are suffering. Not this type of suffering. No, 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 no. Buddhism is deeper. The Buddha was talking about different. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Okay? So let's try to have that in mind. Try to create that intention that we are here to really develop our minds, really, really, really open our hearts, so we can be, better human beings, not only for ourselves, finding the path, the tools, the method, and really the results of using these methods to achieve freedom from the suffering and elimination of these causes, so they never come back again. And may we be able to develop our qualities, perfect them in unconditional and unlimited ways, so we can benefit others. And like that, this is our contribution to a more peaceful and kind and loving world. So think about that. That's why we are here today, talking and discussing and asking questions, That's why. And for that, so we need to remind ourselves of this intention, and we need to really counteract the self-cherishing attitude. Okay? So with that in mind, let's do the prayer. May all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings be inseparable from the happiness that is free from suffering. And may all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free from attachment for friends and hatred for enemies. Then we go to 98. We're going to take refuge and generate bodhicitta. So refuge means that we are deciding that we want to find the right tools, the right people, the right teachings to help us achieve this aim. And bodhicitta means that we are not only wanting this aim of enlightenment and freedom from suffering and happiness, constant, pure, happiness, not only for ourselves, but for others. So that is why, yeah? So we go for refuge together. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. Very good. So we created that intention, okay? So not forget that. So who remembers what we were talking last week? Anyone? Dun, 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 dun. Last week on Tuesday, what we were talking about? What did we talk? Anyone remember? Nobody remember? Yes, Deb.
You were talking about finding the causes of suffering so that suffering with dissatisfaction could cease, and then it's like taking medicine to walk the path.
Very good. So it's a way for us to understand the Four Noble Truths. So that's why we're going to do it. The Buddha really was very special by teaching the first teachings, the Four Noble Truths, right? So we need to really dive and connect and understand and, learn more about it. Because otherwise it becomes something as if it's like, oh yeah, it's the first teachings of the Buddha. I've been a Buddhist for a long time. I know, I want the real juicy thing, the high advanced, whatever type of crazy meditation. And we think we forget that the first teachings of the Buddha is the entire path. Okay? So that is very important because, the First Noble Truth is like we start to understand, that we need, it's very funny, as I said already before, right? The Buddha had a very difficult task, right? Because he had to teach us things that we didn't want to hear. He had to educate us about our own current situation, no? Because even though we might have some sort of suffering, some sort of problems in our daily lives right now, right? We all know, when we have a problem, we have a situation in the family, we have a disease, we are sick, or someone happens something, with someone that we like, or something happened to us, or someone get angry at us, and all of that, or we get depressed. You understand that, right? But we haven't fully understood the magnitude, the size of our suffering. Yeah? We haven't understood that yet. We have not yet, because many times our suffering comes in a different kind of like a gift paper, and we believe that actually it comes disguised by happiness. And then when we open the gift, it's suffering. We don't know that yet. So we need to start being aware of it. We need to start understanding, right? We really need to start understanding that, we find ourselves right now in a situation that is restrictive, that is confining, that is unpleasant, right? And that situation causes us suffering, causes us problems. And not only this, it happens in some ways, if you think about it, without a bit of our control, is against almost our wish, right? Because as I say many times, we don't wake up saying, oh, I hope I can suffer today. Even though we wake up with that feeling, of I hope I cannot suffer, I hope that I don't have obstacles or everything goes well, we still find ourselves again and again and again experiencing these unpleasant situations, isn't it? Right? But for that, we need to then recognize, right? We need to recognize the situation so we can develop the desire to change. So recognizing it is the first step toward freeing ourselves from it. Yes? Is what we always have spoken about. If a drug addict doesn't think that they have a problem, they will never wanting to find a solution for it, right? So it is important for us to understand, truly understand the situation that we are in, so we can start generating, okay? Again, I'm using, even though my English is very bad, I'm using here the right term to say we start generating. It's not a generation like that. Okay? So understanding suffering, understanding the current situation we have, it's a developing process. And the more we recognize, the more we start to generate. So we start to generating, okay, the wish to be free from this suffering. That is important because normally we have a tendency to be a little bit as I like to say, extreme people. I don't know you guys. No, I'm talking about me. I'm an extreme person. So what we think is that we hear that, oh, there is something, that there is suffering, and then there is a cause, and if I understand, everything is going to be gone. No. It's almost like the moment you start understanding, the moment the problem, the work starts to happen. You understand? Because right now we are completely under the control of it. We are having no type of control. It's just like we don't know. It just slide, as I like to say, because in my mind there's that kind of like, the sliding is like you're just like you can't control yourself, and it's just like and then you just fall, right? So that is the idea, is that right now because we don't have understanding and we don't recognize where we are at our situation, we continue to create the causes and the conditions to suffer again and again and again. So that is the reason why we need to really become familiar with it, right? So we need to understand that that's what we are kind of like aiming to do, right? To first break from this cycle of suffering, from this constant suffering, we need to develop that understanding. We need to understand deep down and start having some wish for it, because in some ways we already know that some things that we do causes us suffering, but we do have a resistance for change because it's known, right? The path, I'm not saying I'm gonna use the word path, but the process or the experience of suffering, even though causes us a bad experience, an unpleasant experience, it is known. So sometimes we kind of like cling to it, we sometimes kind of like, how can I say, we have some resistance to changing it. And here I feel that it is literally because of two things, okay? So to generate that wish to change and to overcome that resistance and to overcome that clinging to that unknown, we need to that known, sorry, to that kind of like the clinging to the known suffering. We need to do two things. We need to really look into the suffering and realize how it is fooling us, or as Rinpoche used to say, cheating on us. Cheating, not shitting, cheating, okay? Bad mouth monk, this one. So, cheating on us, and at the same time, we need to understand more is like, okay, if I am gonna give up, if I'm gonna renounce, if I'm gonna let it go of the known suffering, what is there? Right? Because if not, I might feel a little bit kind of like uncertain, because we're looking for some certainty in some ways. No, if you think about it, our minds are looking for security and certainty all the time. And that is exactly one of the problems of the suffering that we have, right? Because we are looking for that certainty and the security in things that could never give us what we want, right? So that is why we need to kind of like, in order to develop and to generate that strong desire to change, our situation, is important that we go and then we start to develop what I call the three types of wisdom. Not what I say, the Lama Tsongkhapa, this incredible, teacher who founded these teachings that we have, in the not founding these teachings, but the school and the way that these studies are organized. He always said that we need three types of wisdom so we can actually achieve certain realization. And I talk about realization in one of the classes. I can't remember which one was that we talk about what realization means, but realization means when we kind of like we completely overcome the logical process and the rational process because we are familiarized and it makes sense and it just becomes second nature, right? So for us to become so completely overcome the resistance, completely overcome our experience, we need to develop the three types of wisdom, which are the wisdom of learning, the wisdom of contemplating, and the wisdom of meditating. Okay? So that is very important. So if we think about it, by starting to understand our current situation, we need, as we say, the Buddha used to say, that we need to understand the prison we are in. Because if we don't think we are in a prison, we will not want to get freedom from it. So, but previously we were saying, I talk about, oh yes, we sometimes cling or we think that, suffering is happiness or, or is known. So we cling to that. But if you think about it, maybe you say, no, that's not possible. Not me. I don't think like that. I know what suffering is. Don't worry, blah, blah, blah. But how about the drug addict, right? Think about the drug addict. The drug addict is normally not stupid people, okay? Dumb people that doesn't know what they are doing. They know exactly, what they are doing. However, they truly believe that the drug that they are taking is happiness, right? They believe in that. They believe that the drug that they use is causing or giving them happiness because nobody's crazy, right? Because they don't think, that these can become, because in their minds, they don't see it as bad still or yet. They don't see it as bad. Therefore, they continue doing. So it's the same with us, right? But if you think about it, a sane person, I hope that nobody here has any drug problems, So we look at someone that is taking drugs and we think, wow, I know that this is not happening. So I don't want to have anything to do with that, right? I know that this is just a very high kick of a very kind of like crazy induced like state that doesn't bring any type of, um, peaceful happiness, right? It's a very transitory, very kind of like, and not only this, very harmful to our body and our minds, isn't it? So actually, we know that using drugs it creates more further suffering for ourselves again and again, right? So that's a little bit how we say that the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas are looking into us. You know, they look into us like drug addicts that even though, we might think that we understand, but we don't. We think that the things that we are doing is correct and brings us happiness, and therefore we continue doing it, but we don't see that some of the aspects and some of the things we are doing is they are creating more suffering for us again and again and again. Okay? So that is important. That is important that we start to understand, that our craving and our kind of like completely deluded way in finding happiness, this craving for these transitory external sensory experiences and pleasures, that we seek all the time, that we kind of like, they also have the same destructive, let's say, effect on us as the drug from the drug addict. Exactly the same. Okay? So we need to start recognizing them. We need to start facing, becoming aware and facing reality, facing how things are, And especially we need to start familiarizing ourselves with these negative aspects so we can start also familiarizing ourselves with the good aspects, right? The positive aspects of our own mind, and not only positive aspects, but also the positive or the real the real reality. I was going to say, or the way reality or how things really exist. So the more we actually see, because what is in not allowing us, what is kind of like an obstacle to us to connect and develop those positive qualities and connect with our kind of like, our with the way realities are, being harmony in reality, as I say, those are these negative emotions and our constant kind of like, habituated tendencies, patterns, and actions that they don't allow us. Okay? So that is why we needed to start and learn about the Four Noble Truths, and especially the Buddha started with the first Noble Truth, which is the truth of suffering, the truth of dukkha, right? So the Buddha started to teach first, as I said, nowadays probably he would be completely there's an expression that young people are using to say, or they're canceling. They would cancel him, they would cancel Buddha in social media. They would not follow him, because people might have a problem to understand why he started talking first about the effect, which is suffering, instead of talking before about or first about the causes of suffering, right? Think about it. First he thought about suffering, and then he said, oh, there's causes for this. But if you think about it in a cause and effect way, it would be like, rationally speaking, to talk about the cause and then the results, and the result is the suffering, which is the first noble truth. But he wanted to do that because if we deeply recognize our condition of dissatisfaction, only by recognizing the suffering that we experience, we can develop renunciation from it, right? And renunciation is the root of freedom, wanting to renounce the state we are in. And then when we want to renounce, then we start to ask the right questions, which is, what are the causes for this to arise, right? Because if we don't renounce, if we don't understand, and if we don't want to renounce, without understanding suffering, there's no drive towards change, towards transformation. Right? There's no drive, there's no wish, there's no desire to look for the causes so I can look for the antidote or the solution. I mean, it just makes sense. It's just rational. No, it's just logical if you think about it. Are you guys following it? Making sense? Any questions so far? Bob? Wait. Wait, but
Not a,
yeah,
not a
go on.
question. I was just going to ask you to repeat what you said.
From
No,
from
this last
from
little sentence. This last little sentence.
okay. So, okay, so then what happens is that the Buddha started teaching from the effects, because by recognizing our suffering condition, the condition of suffering that we are in, the wish to renounce, to stop, to let it go, to cessate arises. Okay? So renunciation is the root of freedom, let's say like that. Freedom from what? From suffering. So first, I need to develop the understanding of suffering, because without the understanding of suffering, there is no drive, there's no wish, there's no desire towards transformation. Hmm? Make sense, Bob? Wait. Sorry.
Here's my question.
Mm-hmm.
You talk about, excuse me, you talk about the understanding of suffering. How do you contrast that to the experience of suffering?
We're gonna talk about both. Understanding of suffering, as I said, is the first of the three wisdoms, right? So we need to first learn about it so we can contemplate, and then we can meditate on it. And the meditation and the contemplation, they will bring us the experience, right? And through understanding, like our own experiences of the feeling of suffering, will act as the fuel, or the dough. Wow, very good. Always about food. The dough to make us kind of like use as what we're going to transform into Buddhahood. Make sense?
Okay.
Yeah? So it is important that we kind of like start to familiarize ourselves with it, through understanding it, to really kind of like understand that the Buddha started to teach the first noble truth as the truth of suffering, or the truth of dukkha, dissatisfaction, right? As the first step in our mental development. Is kind of like a pedagogical, we say pedagogical, yes, like, yeah, a step-by-step process, right? Because if you think about it, the truth of the causes is actually, the beginning, right? And the truth of suffering is the effect of it, right? Because we have the negative emotions and the karma, therefore we experience and we feel, as you said, no, Bob, the suffering, right? So it's the effect of it. But in this way, the Buddha taught from the perspective of what are the necessary steps for us to develop first, so we can achieve, the cessation of it, to achieve the elimination. So if we don't recognize the suffering, if we don't understand it, we don't see that there is a cause, and we don't look for the cessation, we don't know that there is a cessation, and then we don't walk the path or don't take the medicine in order to eliminate it, right? So this is the sequence, or the step by step, how we as students, and as followers in some ways of that kind of like methodology, or students of the pedagogical aspect of the Buddha, how we should meditate, how we should learn, how we should contemplate on, right? So that's how he developed, or how he taught, from the perspective of how our inner development, how we kind of like psychologically we should develop that understanding, right? That's why I feel myself, and I know I'm very stupid, but I think that there is a rational aspect of it. There's a reason, very very interesting for that, right? So if we do not meditate in suffering, we don't generate renunciation. So if we don't generate renunciation, the wish to be free from it, how we can achieve that freedom, right? So, and it's not easy or not enough to just think about like a superficial like wish to be free from suffering. We need to really want to stop it completely, right? It's not like, oh no, maybe I don't need to, like, I don't use any more heroin or whatever, but I still smoke or do something, some type of drug. Then it doesn't work, right? Then we're gonna think that Buddha and the not vulnerable truths don't work. Okay, so we need to understand, that we really need to eliminate. So for that, we need to discover what are the types of suffering. Okay. So the Buddha, and especially the Tibetans later on, they kind of like created many lists for understanding the different types of suffering. Okay? We can divide, so let's say that the Buddha divided mainly in 3 types of suffering, 6 types of suffering, or 8 types of suffering. Okay? And here I need to remind ourselves that the different types of suffering, they are not only related to the suffering of one lifetime, okay? But they are related to the suffering of existence in samsara, existence in whatever realm, in whatever past or future life we're gonna go to, So the types of suffering that we are discussing here is the type of sufferings that all of us in like animals and spirits or whatever kind of like things you want to call experience. Yes? So that is important for us to understand that the idea here is not only to say, I want to be free from suffering in this life, but next life is okay if I just continue coming back again and again and suffering again and again. That's not what renunciation of the Buddha was talking about. The type of renunciation, and renunciation is a big word and is maybe a word that I don't like so much, but renunciation means it's a conscious choice, a conscious decision that I don't want that anymore for me, right? I want to be free. I want to stop. It's kind of like it's our friend Isabel. Isabel is there? Yes, Isabel is there. Isabel told us once in one class, she said something like, oh, I spent almost 2 years, more than 2 years trying to stop smoking, and then out of one day I just stop it, right? So for 2 years, she was creating, habituating herself with like the idea of renouncing or stopping smoking. So she was thinking what are the negative sides, what doesn't work, why is bad, and then, but because of the habitual tendency, she would still go over there and smoke a little bit. Okay, so it's not one thing. It's like it takes time and it takes kind of like a work, and then at some point the conditions come together, and then we are able to say, okay, now I have the knowledge, I have the strength, I have the energy. I will stop today and I will not do it again. Okay, however, even when we do that, sometimes we fall. Okay, so what we do, we continue developing the understanding and the wish to be free. We continue understanding, the negative aspects, the kind of like the suffering, the how it works, how it damages our body, our mind, our relationships, everything. So we continue. But it's important that I put that into kind of like that I remind ourselves of that, because when the Buddha was talking about the different types of suffering, he was thinking about that idea of not only wanting to be free from suffering in this life, but forever. That is the idea that the Buddha wants. The Buddha was very kind of like, big thinking, not small thinking, like, oh, okay, if I just have one pad thai or in one red curry, I'm okay. Not like that, right? It's like, he was like, no, I want to stop, hunger forever in me and others, everybody. So that's the idea, okay? So that is why we need to start understanding the types. So we're going to start with the 8 types of suffering today. Okay, so you guys can kind of like start getting used to these types of suffering. And the first suffering that we talk about is the suffering of birth. Okay, so the suffering of not giving birth. Okay, because the women in the house that had kids know that yes, it can be very painful giving birth, right? But it's the suffering from our side, of the side of all the beings who have been born And the suffering of birth means that actually the action of birth, it's a little bit traumatic sometimes, right? It is a lot of kind of like we are over there in that kind of like wet little thing, being fed, being relaxed, and all of that. And all of a sudden, someone is kind of like taking out the water. We are starting to not know how to do, and then there's kind of like someone pushing us, and then and then all of that. Think about it. It's not a so even though for us it's like a beautiful experience, and I just had the privilege to see my niece, being born is very special. But for the baby, if you think about it, I could see her face and I could see her, she was like, a little bit kind of like that, right? And if you think about it, like there's so many animals as well. If when you see some of the animals, wow, they also kind of like some animals, the mother is just walking and then, kind of like falls on the ground, boom, like that, right? It's not a kind of like a pleasant thing. Let's face it. So the suffering of birth is kind of like having to again and again going through this process. Yeah. We need to go through this process again and again. So, and there's some people that say that like some of the things that happen in the birth, like for example, if you have to be, sometimes you're not in the right position, and then the baby, and then you need to turn or whatever, and then you need to take out or like these, like so many things that people say that becomes a bit traumatic. So that all of this is suffering. There is a suffering in there. Okay, so it's important for us to recognize, and this will happen in the different realms, in the different places where we're going to be reborn. Okay, so that is the first type of suffering, which is the start, let's say, of our life in this planet or wherever we are being born. Maybe in Mars, maybe in Jupiter, or whatever we're going to be reborn in. So what happens is that then, of course, yes, we are born and we know, okay. But then think about the suffering of illness. We all have the potential to be ill, sick. And then the suffering of sickness or the suffering of illness, wow, it can be extremely strong sometimes, no? Our body starts to change, and we can see how kind of like that creates extremely sometimes painful experiences to the body. We all already feel sick sometimes, especially us men. We all know that if we have a little kind of like flu, we are already suffering like if there was no tomorrow, if we're gonna die the next moment. So we know that like the suffering of like of illness is not easy. But also think about it. Try to remember, maybe you're sick now. Try to see how your mind is a little bit dull, how your mind is a little bit maybe unhappy, maybe cranky, maybe, So that also starts to bring the suffering of the body, the illness of the body, the sickness of the body, also in some ways makes the mind dull and down and kind of like depressed, as I say, we normally, we are kind of like, I don't know, like for me, even happens sometimes that when I'm sick, that I don't want to eat pad thai or burrito, which is really, something very extreme, but it happens sometimes. But if you think, that means that the illness and the sickness, it starts to kind of like no longer make the things that we desire appealing to us, right? The things that normally gives us pleasure, temporary pleasures, we don't want, right? So life becomes a little bit like blunt, yeah? And not only this, sometimes we need to go to the hospital and we need to do exams and we need to do things, and we don't like some of these things, okay? So it's a type of suffering that creates quite a few problems, to ourselves, to our body, to our mental state. And then it's kind of like we say that is a separation from our own energy and force, and we don't want that. We don't like that, right? So it's important that we recognize that as long as we are having a birth in the way that we are kind of like, being contaminated by our minds, by our bodies, by these situations, and then we kind of like starts to, crave for things, and we start to see things, and then when we get sick, then the sickness and the illness becomes a very strong suffering. Okay, And then, not only this sickness, then we have the other type of suffering that maybe some of you already know a little bit more than me, the suffering of aging. You know, Bob knows because Bob is getting old, you know? So, you know, so, so we can know the suffering of getting old, of having the body starting to stop, you know, nothing's working so much, or you know, like my heart doesn't pump as should it, like as the same way, and I cannot do the same things, you know. Even though the mind, if you think about it, because I can feel that already. That sometimes I wish I could do this and that. Oh yes, I know. And we're gonna do this, and we're gonna go to the Everglades. When we come back to the Everglades, we're gonna go to this place, and we're gonna do many things. And then we come back from the Everglades, and you know, Kalden is just like tired because like getting old, you know. So he's like, oh no, maybe I don't do anything, maybe I just sleep, you know, like this. So getting old, you can see how also our energy for doing many things and even practicing, you know, even meditating, even learning, or even kind of like being able to concentrate starts to change. And the older we become, the less control of our bodies, of like, you know, of our health situation we have. Sometimes then we need more help, then we cannot have independency, then we need others, and then, you know, so it's not a kind of like easy experience. It's an experience that can create a lot of suffering. I know, Bob. I know that it can also create a lot of good things, and I know that it has a benefit because you don't have like so many things, you know. I know your smile. I can see your smile, you know. So I know that also getting old has a lot of benefits. But this way.
You were right on the first half.
That's a good answer, okay? We are very old, including babies, as you said.
Exactly.
Getting old.
Exactly. Everybody's getting old, you know, and it's just a truth of our life, you know. It's a truth of our lives, but it is in some ways in the nature of suffering. That is what the Buddha was trying to tell us, right? It is in the nature of suffering, having to do this again and again and again and again, right? Remember, it's not about only this life. And then we have another type of suffering that we have discussed quite a few times, which is the suffering of death. No? The unknown of death. The unknown of being, and the pain and the suffering and the discomfort of being separated from what we like, from our possessions, from our body, from the people we love. No? From our friends. Isn't it? So it is not like a walk in the park if we don't prepare for it, if we don't actually look into it, if we don't, you know, like really get an understanding of it. And especially because death, as we have said quite a few times already here, we did the Death Cafe, we talked about in different classes, death happens to all of us. It will happen, it's certain, completely certain, right? But the time of death, uncertain. So that creates already anxiety and worry. No? Many people come to me and say, oh, I don't have so much problem with death. I know that I'm going to die, but I just don't want to die suffering. I just don't want to be drowning on the fire or whatever, right? Like people think like this. I understand, but like we don't have so much control of that as well, right? So death in itself is an experience of right now of suffering because of the way we approach it, right? As I say, is important, and I said that in the beginning, but I think it is important. There's nothing wrong. It's not about renunciation. It's not about stopping, saying, okay, I want to kind of like and I want to stop eating everything, you know, I'm just gonna live on, I don't know, air and like the plants, photosynthesis, you say, like getting, you know, like a sun, you know, and photos, you know, I don't know how to say that, you know, like, you know, you're gonna just live like that. That doesn't work. It's not about that. We need to enjoy the things that we have as a human being, knowing its reality. That's what the Buddha was saying. That's why he said, understand and realize suffering, right? Realize where the suffering lies. The suffering doesn't lie in the death in itself. It can be, because of course it can be suffering, physical suffering, and we can go through it, of course, but especially in the mental state that we approach and we have the connection with suffering. Yes? Makes sense what I'm saying? Yeah? That is important. That is very important for us to understand, because then we start to see the death in itself, and the process of being rebirth, like birth, or being reborn, and then the process of aging, the process of sickness, the process of dying, Yes, that's what we want to get rid of in the way we are experiencing. Because then, otherwise, you guys, in a couple of weeks, or maybe in a couple of months, or maybe in a couple of years, depending on the way Kalden speaks, blah, 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 we're going to start to say that we actually, when we go, I'm going to go a little bit forward so you guys can understand what I'm trying to talk about. We're going to talk about, when we say the bodhicitta attitude, that we want to come back again and again to help others. So then Bob is going to say, Kalden, this is completely the opposite of what you said about, not wanting to be free from suffering, right? But he is totally different, because right now we have zero control of where we're going to be reborn. We have zero control of the circumstances and the conditions of our aging, sickness, and death, all of that. The difference is that when we develop a wish to become a Buddha, and we really become develop our compassion, our bodhicitta, we start to have control of these things, and we start to choose. And we go through certain situations, whatever it is, in order to benefit others. Right? Even if conventionally looks like we are suffering, mentally no suffer. Is exactly how I could experience that with Lama Zopa Rinpoche, Rinpoche had a stroke, had a stroke. And then he kind of used to walk like this and all of that. And in the beginning, it was just beautiful, because Rinpoche, people started to say, oh, Rinpoche needs to do a lot of, how do you call it? Physiotherapy, right? In order to kind of exercise. And then Rinpoche used to start with taking pills. So he would want to try to take pills with the left hand, so he could and then he would go, and then the mouth, and then he would put, and then the thing would fall, and he would just laugh at himself and say, this body, not very bad body, not working like this, but at least I hope that I can practice Dharma, right? So that is very important. So the body, it doesn't become anymore a hindrance for practicing Dharma. We don't waste our time when we have the wish to benefit others, and when we have the wish to come back. We don't waste our time using our body to become beautiful, to put, Botox and all of these, come to Brazil to put Botox, like that, not like this, No, make big boobies, boobs like this, not like this, We don't waste time. We just use time in order to benefit others, right? So the body becomes the death, even death can become a way to benefit others. For those that are going to come with us to Nepal, we're going to visit in Kopan. We have a place where we have the incredible fortune to visit the two big masters that were in Kopan. One of them was the abbot of Kopan, and one of them was a very special teacher that one day we're going to watch this movie. I'm going to talk to Dan. Where's Dan? Dan, you are there. I'm gonna send you the movie that you need to screen at the center for the movie nights we're gonna have. You guys are gonna start having movie nights, because you guys also need to have popcorn and movie, So you guys are gonna have one movie that is talking about, called Unmistaken Child. And it talks about, finding the reincarnation of this teacher called Geshe Lama Konchok. Was a very high advanced teacher that was in Nepal. And he was very good friends with Lama Yeshe and Lama Zopa, so he came to Kopan, and he died. And when they burned his body, because for Buddhists, after they kind of they have done the meditation, and that they kind of they know that the mind, the subtle mind, has continued to another rebirth. So the body doesn't mean anything, just, But even for these beings who are wanting to help others and inspire others, when they burn the body, precious pills, precious relics started to come, right? And then you go to these places and then you have a piece of bone, and out of this piece of bone, like pearls, you know, like that you find in the ocean, pearls. They are there, coming and multiplying, hundreds of them, just coming to inspire others, to say, even for the in the way to benefit others, so like they can understand that they can control the power of their mind of intention if they want to benefit others. Even the action of death, which is considered suffering, can inspire and help others, right? So that is the idea. That is kind of like the aspect of what we want to achieve. So that, but let's face it, we are not there yet. So then for us right now, death is suffering. Yes? For us, the way we find it, the way we approach it, the way we think about it, even if we might have the most thinking in our minds that we have everything under control, you know, and I hope it happens like that, but it still creates some anxiety. It still creates some sort of worry, dissatisfaction, right? That is important. That is important for us to start kind of like understanding that. Someone has a question?
Yeah, Karma here.
Yes.
The thing is, I think this aspect that we are talking about, death, is a lot of cultural as well. You know, our society and all these aspects that we went through today, all of them is very cultural.
Well, but culture doesn't exist by itself, right? What
Yeah.
is culture besides us, right? Culture is us creating those kind of like of valuing, you know, we put value in these situations, in these circumstances, in this way of thinking, right? Which are exactly why they are enhancing and habituating ourselves, helping to habituate ourselves more and more into continue to suffer. That is exactly what the Buddha said, that, you know, looking at us as people, individual, but as a society, what we are doing is actually that we are creating more and more, we are habituating ourselves to suffer more because we think in this way, right? So one thing creates the others, like the individual aspect of these fears, of these things, or these kind of like illness, or these age and all of that comes from these mistaken views that we hold it as an individual, and that we bring it to the society level, right? It's an expression of our inner world. So I agree, and is exact, and one thing then starts to feed the other, right? That's how it feels. It's kind of like the more we kind of like live in society, the more it
People start
works.
to behave different. I said, no, I don't pursue life in this way, or I don't think like that. So people are gonna start to look at, man, are there two people?
Sorry, come again.
Wasn't open that?
Yeah. It was, but someone started talking.
Okay.
To
So
get talk it again, Carmen, please.
everybody now, if you have a certain kind of thought or behavior in life that's not the common sense of this society, you are considered like somebody, an entity out of the society, whatever the behavior.
So that is the definition of Kalden. That's what Kalden is, right? Because Kalden is completely crazy, right? So
Absolutely, yeah, I
you know,
imagine.
but that is the thing. So that's why we need courage, but we need also the wish. So that is exactly the point that the Buddha kind of like started to teach, is that if we don't start teaching in this way, we're just gonna kind of like follow the society, follow our habitual tendencies, and just continue creating the suffering more and more and more. So what we are trying to do here is that we don't necessarily need to kind of like act externally so much, but we need to understand the mind, right? The mindsets, that the views, the wrong views that we see or that we hold towards some of these aspects is the causes for our main suffering, right? So it's not necessarily the suffering in itself because of society, kind of like, oh, we should change society or stop, get out, or as you said, like go out of society. It's more about the mindset that we use in order to transform. Because then, remember, Buddhism is an inner transformation. So we start first with the inner aspects. And the more we start with the inner aspects, we start to kind of like transform and realize some of the kind of like the external things. And then we start to have decisions. Well, we can actually go to Brazil and make our boobs bigger and then do Botox or not, right? So we start to actually make a decision. So that is like the type of kind of like influence or the size or the motivation, let me put it like this, the motivation for us to do it or not do something will come from the understanding of the sufferings, right? Understanding that it doesn't matter if we're gonna kind of like become more beautiful in this life, but we're still gonna be suffering old age, sickness, birth, and death, right? So that is the idea. That is very important that we understand. Makes sense?
Yes.
Yes. Someone else wants to ask something? No? Okay. So I'm not gonna continue with the 4 other things today. It's already 9:10. I know that we kind of like needs to be careful with time for you guys, so it doesn't become also too tiring, the online. But I just would like you guys to start thinking this week. Homework, don't forget. And especially you guys that come to all my classes, you have homework many times. So you have many homework. Like, you need to kind of like be all day doing homework. But homework this time today is very important homework because, if we don't start paying attention to these aspects of life, and maybe here the easier might be, old age, sickness, and death, because birth maybe might feel a little bit far from us, for us to remember, but to think what the Buddha meant or what it means, how you approach these ideas, if you think that you can see the type of suffering that the Buddha was talking about, right? The type of dissatisfaction, the type of kind of like, as I like to say, like understanding that that these conditions create suffering for us, right? The way we approach them, the way we think and feel about them, that is very important. If we don't understand then, because the other this is kind of like we call the general types of suffering. We say that the Buddha, when the Buddha got in, when Buddha was still Siddhartha, and he was still a prince, he had everything, and he was kind of like locked in this castle. And then when he left, he saw these 4 types of suffering. These were the 4 like first types of suffering that the Buddha saw. He saw he saw someone giving birth and how it was kind of like painful for both the mother, but especially the child as well. And then he saw a corpse and he said, wow. And then so many people crying, and then the corpse being like deformed, all of this. Then he saw someone sick, and then he saw the pain of the sickness and all of that. And then he saw the suffering of old age, and especially people not taking care and not being a little bit mean. And, like if we think about it, old people in our society, of course, we have a tendency, especially in places like America, that to be independent. So old people want to be independent so they don't have to, be worried about if the family or people are going to take care of them. But if you think about it, old age, people don't value or don't respect sometimes, old age and the difficulties of it. So the Buddha saw all of this. So these were the first 4 kind of like main sufferings. And out of that, in some ways, was realizing that. And then he came back to the castle, okay? And then these other 4 types of suffering that we're going to talk about, the suffering of like, we we talk about the suffering of like meeting with the unpleasant, or separation for the pleasant, or of not achieving what we want, or all of these things that we're going to talk next week. Then I started to realize that when he went back, that he had everything, but he was still finding these other types of suffering, right? He was still encountering things that were unpleasant. He was still having separation for people and things that he loved. So that also created suffering, right? So that was the aspects that came into his own life, right? The Buddha had to, and that's what I say about it, and it's very important that I keep repeating that the Buddha didn't invent any of these things. He simply observed, right? He was an observer, a science guy who observed his own life and the lives around and the reality, and started to say, this is suffering. This is not happiness. This is not what I kind of like, my mind is telling me what it is. So that is the main point, okay? That we start understanding, realizing, and then it's not for us to kind of like go down depressed and start, oh, I'm bad, oh, I'm suffering. Not like this. No, it's like, wow, now, yes, like I can see it. Now I can look for the, for the causes. Now I can look for the way to, like, for cessation. Know that there is a cessation. Know that there is a recipe, no, how do you say that? A diagnosis and a way to, to kind of like fix it. And then I do it, that is the idea. Okay? So let's dedicate for everything that we talked today of the blah, 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 and especially the blah, blah, blah suffering, that it might really be useful for us. Because otherwise, if we don't actually do that, it's impossible for us to start a spiritual path, right? It's very funny because we might not understand, but if we really look, each of us here, we came because of some sort of suffering, okay? Something within ourselves that is, it is any type of spiritual path comes from that, right? But the Buddha just wants us to understand and really get a general idea of the types of suffering and the suffering that we are talking about here, so we can eliminate them, the causes of them, okay? So let's dedicate, and we dedicate really, especially, thinking about all of the incredible conditions that we have, for being here, for being able to kind of like listening to this, the wish to listen to this, the desire, the condition, the kind of like intellect, the rational mind, but the interest to do that. So let's make sure that we use all of these and know everything that we heard in order to really transform our minds, okay? As I said, we really need to apply it to our minds. We need to make it sure that we apply it to daily lives so we can achieve that state of no more suffering and that state of completely happiness, and therefore having developed all the good qualities, all of these necessary skills, all the necessary wisdom, all the necessary compassion, we are able to then help others to achieve the same state. Okay? That is the most important thing. And of course, we would not be here, we not even learn about these things if we are not from the kindness of our teachers, and not only the kindness of, explaining and the oral transmissions, or reading or writing books or giving teachings and all of that, but especially with their realizations in their minds, making us understand and believe and experience it is possible to achieve this transformation, to achieve this enlightenment. Okay? Very important that we think like that, and we dedicate for that, for their long and healthy lives, and for them to continue guiding us in all our future lives, wherever we are, whatever type of suffering we encounter, may they always appear to guide us towards understanding suffering, understanding the Four Noble Truths, learning, contemplating, and meditating on them, so we can achieve, the freedom from them. Okay? That is very important. So what we're gonna then dedicate is also for the center to continue flourishing, so we can have a space where we can do these things, okay? We can learn, we can contemplate, we can meditate, we can get together, we can have friends and have people that we know that think like us, it can help us. So as our friend Carmen said, so we can also be a bit of a kind of like a safe haven into the crazy society we live in, that's very important as well. So we dedicate for that, okay? So we're going to do the dedicating prayers, so we can come back to that intention stronger, okay? So we do the dedicating prayers. Due to the merits of these virtuous actions, may I quickly attain the state of a Guru Buddha and lead all living beings without exception into that enlightened state. May the supreme jewel, bodhicitta, that has not arisen, arise and grow, and may that which has arisen not diminish, but increase more and more. And I like to add another one that it says, may the supreme jewel of correct view, or the view of reality, that has not arisen, arise and grow, and may that which has arisen not diminish, but increase more and more. And we're gonna do, you know, the long life prayer for His Holiness the Dalai Lama. So we make sure that we continue being guided by His Holiness and asking for His Holiness to embody these teachings again and again, not only in these lives, but all future lives, so we can really have these realizations as well ourselves, develop ourselves. In the land encircled by the snow mountains, you are the source of all happiness and good. O powerful Chenrezig Tenzin Gyatso, please remain until samsara ends. And as we are in a center that it was created due to the kindness of Lama Zopa Rinpoche, we then gonna, you know, make strong prayers, and especially these prayers from His Holiness the Dalai Lama for Rinpoche to come back, for swift return. He's already reborn, but we want him to come back. Peerless teacher, an assembly of the children of the victorious ones, Shravakas and Pratyeka Buddhas, victorious Losang, father and sons, along with the lineage masters, all objects of refuge of infinite lands, please bestow the virtue and goodness of accomplishing this prayer here and now. Holding and spreading the Muni's precious and complete teachings through explanation and practice, you are the armor of patience that is never discouraged. Incomparable Venerable Guru, to you I make this request. While striving single-pointedly for the sake of the victorious one's teachings, the sole gateway through which all benefit and happiness emerge, and from other living beings you suddenly departed to peace, what a great loss. Nevertheless, and through the undeceiving truth of the blessings of the ocean, of the three jewels, and the great waves of bodhicitta, of the children of the victorious ones, may the smile of a reincarnation swiftly beam in glory for fortunate disciples. Okay, we've done it. We made it. Everybody survived. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for all of you. Thank you so much for being there, and especially for people that came to the center. Thank you so much for organizing it. Margaret, Sharon, Bob, Jack, especially, and Carmen and Isabel. Thank you so much, and thank you everybody. Thank you, Iris. Thank you, Deb. Thank you, Tali. Thank you, Sandra and Brian and Dan and Ann and Tara. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you.
Thank
See you
you.
tomorrow
Love you.
morning for meditation. See you Thursday for Lojong, and see you Sunday for our blah 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 talk. Thank you.
Thank
Talk,
you.
talk. Go
Oi,
ahead, Margaret, go.
Oh, I wanted to ask you something.
let me just
Did
stop the
you-
recording.